Human Hero vs. Alien Empire, The Ultimate Battle for Earth's Survival. Ethan Carter and Ava Collins. HFY Sci-Fi. Story. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Ethan Carter stood tall amidst the ruins of what was once a thriving city. His dark brown hair was slightly ruffled by the winds that swept across the desolate landscape, his piercing green eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. He wasn't just any soldier, he was one of Earth's most decorated officers, known for his sharp mind and tactical brilliance. Yet, today was different. Today, the Earth he fought to protect was on the brink of destruction. The Zalkari, an alien species far more advanced than humanity, had set their sights on Earth. With weapons that could obliterate entire cities in seconds and technology that seemed almost magical to human eyes, they were a force unlike anything Earth had ever faced. But Ethan was undeterred. He had seen the impossible before, and against all odds, humanity had triumphed. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about proving that Earth was more than just a footnote in the galaxy. The Zalkari might have the most advanced weapons, but humanity had something they didn't: resilience, ingenuity, and an unyielding spirit. Ethan had made the decision to lead the last line of defense, not just as a soldier, but as a symbol of what humanity was capable of. His team, small yet formidable, had gathered in secret locations around the world, preparing for a counteroffensive that would send shockwaves through the galaxy. But before the fight could begin, Ethan knew one thing: this battle wasn't going to be won with brute force alone. It was going to take strategy, intelligence, and above all, heart. As he looked out over the horizon, he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride for the people of Earth. They weren't going to let their home fall without a fight. And neither was he. The fight for humanity's future was about to begin. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The Zalkari were coming, and every passing hour brought Earth closer to the brink of annihilation. But Ethan had a plan. It wasn't just about surviving this invasion, it was about outsmarting an enemy far superior in technology. He had spent weeks studying the Zalkari, analyzing every scrap of data he could find. Their ships were fast, their weapons powerful, but they had one flaw: overconfidence. They believed they were unbeatable. Ethan intended to use that against them. "We're not here to fight fair," he muttered to himself, looking out over the desolate city. "We're here to win." As his team gathered, Ethan outlined the strategy. Ava Collins, the skilled pilot, would lead a small squadron of fighters to disrupt the enemy's communications. Maya Rodriguez, the tactical genius, would coordinate a series of decoys to mislead the Zalkari into spreading their forces thin. And Ethan would lead the final charge. He had a personal stake in this battle. The Zalkari had already destroyed his home, his family, and everything he held dear. This wasn't just a mission for him. It was personal. He had lost everything, but in that loss, he had gained something far more valuable: a relentless will to fight, to win, and to protect what remained of humanity. The first step of the plan was a calculated risk. Ethan and his team would have to infiltrate the Zalkari flagship, a massive vessel orbiting Earth, and plant an EMP device to disable their primary weapon systems. This would give humanity its best shot at survival. As Ethan prepared to board the ship, he couldn't help but think about what they were up against. The Zalkari were not just an alien species, they were an unstoppable force, known for their ruthlessness and advanced technology. Yet, despite all their power, they lacked the one thing that made humanity so dangerous: a fighting spirit that could not be extinguished. Ethan wasn't just going to sabotage their ship. He was going to send a message that humanity would never back down. "Ready?" Maya's voice came through his calm always. Ethan replied with a determined smile. Let's do this. As the team boarded their stealth shuttle and headed for the Zalkari flagship, Ethan's mind raced. They had no room for error. The EMP had to be placed in the heart of the enemy vessel, and once it was activated, they would have only minutes to escape before the Zalkari realized what had happened. Ethan trusted his team. He knew Ava, Maya, and the others would execute their roles flawlessly. But it was on him to lead them through the final stage of this battle. The shuttle rocketed through the atmosphere, heading straight for the massive Zalkari ship. The tension in the cabin was palpable as they neared their target. Ethan looked out the window, staring at the cold, metallic behemoth in front of him. This was it. This was the moment that would determine the fate of humanity. Ethan's heart pounded as the shuttle continued its high-speed approach toward the Zalkari flagship. The countdown clock on the dashboard ticked away, each second echoing in his mind. He looked at his team, all of them focused, determined, and ready to carry out their part of the mission. Ava was at the controls, her hands steady as she guided the shuttle toward the ship's docking bay. Maya, sitting beside Ethan, was running the final checks on the EMP device they'd be planting inside the enemy vessel. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The Zalkari flagship loomed large before them, its dark, intimidating silhouette cutting through the stars like a giant shadow. Ethan could almost feel the weight of its presence, the power emanating from the massive vessel. But as overwhelming as it was, there was no turning back now. We're almost there, Ava's calm voice broke through the tension. Prepare for docking. Ethan nodded, his mind already racing ahead to what needed to happen next. Once they docked, they would have a limited window of time to infiltrate the ship and plant the EMP device. The success of this mission depended on the element of surprise. The Zalkari didn't know they were coming, yet. The shuttle's engines hummed as they aligned with the docking port, the sound of metal locking into place signaling that they had arrived. Ethan gave a final look to his team. Remember, he said, his voice firm, this is the chance we've been waiting for. We get in, we plant the device, and we get out, fast. No mistakes. The team nodded in unison. There was no room for error. As the docking bay doors slid open, Ethan led the way, his boots hitting the cold metal floor of the Zalkari ship. His senses heightened, he scanned their surroundings. The interior of the enemy vessel was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were sleek, metallic, with a faint blue glow that illuminated the long corridors. The air felt different, stale, charged with an energy he couldn't quite place. He motioned for the team to follow as they crept through the dark halls, using the shadows to conceal their movements. Every step felt heavier, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on them. They moved quickly, staying low, relying on their training to guide them through the unfamiliar terrain. The EMP device was tucked securely in Ethan's bag, and he could feel its presence like a constant reminder of the stakes. They had only one shot to disable the Zalkari's weapons systems, and if they failed, Earth's fate would be sealed. As they reached the heart of the ship, Ethan paused, listening for any sounds of movement. The hallway ahead was clear. They were getting closer. The EMP needed to be placed in the core of the ship's central power hub, a place guarded by advanced security systems. But that was where Maya came in. With her sharp mind and technical expertise, she had already mapped out a way to bypass the security protocols. This is it, Ethan whispered, giving the signal to move forward. Maya went to work, her fingers flying over the device as she decrypted the ship's systems. Time was running out. Ethan kept watch, his every sense alert, knowing that the smallest sound could alert the Zalkari to their presence. Minutes passed, each one stretching like an eternity. Then, finally, Maya looked up, her face lit by the soft glow of the console. "We're in," she said, her voice steady. "EMP is ready to go." Ethan exhaled, relief flooding through him. But there was no time to celebrate. "Let's move," he said, his voice sharp. The team quickly positioned themselves around the core, placing the EMP device in its designated spot. With a final glance at Maya, Ethan activated the device, and they began to retreat, moving as swiftly as they could. As the EMP began to power up, Ethan knew they had done their part. The countdown to the weapon's shutdown had started. The mission wasn't over yet, but they had taken the first step. The Valkyrie might be coming for them, but humanity had just struck back. Ethan's heart raced as the countdown for the EMP device continued to tick down. They had planted the device, but now they were running out of time. The team quickly retraced their steps through the narrow corridors of the Valkyrie flagship, the soft hum of the alien vessel's power systems filling the air. Ava, leading the group, kept her eyes sharp, checking every corner, every shadow. Maya, who had been operating the decryption systems, was now focused on maintaining the team's communication with the outside world. "We need to move faster," Ethan said, his voice low but urgent. "The EMP is primed. The second it goes off, we need to be clear of the ship's core." The tension in the air was thick as the team moved swiftly, their boots echoing off the metal floors. They were nearly there, just one last stretch before they would be free of the immediate danger zone. But the sound of a loud alarm suddenly blared throughout the ship, causing the hairs on the back of Ethan's neck to stand up. "They know we're here," Ava muttered, her voice tense. The ship's alert systems had been triggered. The Valkyrie had discovered their presence. Ethan motioned for the team to pick up the pace. "Stay focused, we can make it." The corridors of the flagship, which had felt so vast and empty just moments ago, were now flooded with a sense of danger. Ethan's mind raced. The EMP would disable the Valkyrie weapon systems, but it wouldn't stop the ship from alerting the rest of the fleet. They had to be gone before the enemy could regroup and send reinforcements. The team pushed forward, but as they rounded a corner, they were met with a surprising sight. Two Valkyrie soldiers appeared at the far end of the hallway. Ethan's pulse quickened. The encounter had come too soon. They weren't ready for direct confrontation. Without a second thought, Ethan raised his hand, signaling for everyone to halt. He gave Ava a quick glance, silently instructing her to find a way around them. Ava, ever the skilled pilot, immediately understood. "On it," she whispered. In the blink of an eye, she pulled a small device from her belt, a signal jammer. Activating it, the team was suddenly cloaked by a brief but effective electronic interference. The Valkyrie soldiers, unable to see them clearly, hesitated, confused. Ethan held his breath, praying that the distraction would be enough. As the soldiers moved closer, the team remained perfectly still, hidden in the shadows. Every moment felt like an eternity. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the soldiers turned and walked past them, oblivious to their presence. "That was too close," Maya said, her voice strained. "We can't keep relying on luck." Ethan nodded, relieved but aware that time was running out. "We'll make it," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the growing urgency. "The EMP will work. We just need to stay focused." With the Valkyrie soldiers gone, they moved again, this time with more caution, every step bringing them closer to the shuttle that would carry them back to safety. The ship's systems were still on high alert, and Ethan knew that the final moments of their mission were going to be the most dangerous. As they neared the docking bay, the feeling of being hunted hung in the air, but they had made it this far. They were almost home free. Ethan checked his wristwatch. 5 minutes to detonation, he said, his voice steady but full of purpose. "Let's move." The team pushed forward one last time, all of them thinking the same thing: they had done it. They had struck back. Earth still had a chance. Ethan's mind raced as the countdown continued, the seconds ticking away with a sense of urgency that was hard to ignore. His team had made it this far, but the final stretch was always the most dangerous. The docking bay was in sight, but there was no guarantee that they would make it there without facing another obstacle. As they moved down the narrow corridor, Ethan's thoughts were focused solely on the task at hand. The EMP device was still active, counting down the moments until it would deactivate the Zalkari's weapon systems. But the Zalkari weren't going to make this easy. The loud hum of the ship's security systems was now amplified by the sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the halls. Ethan signaled for the team to stop. He motioned for Maya to check the security feeds. "Are we clear?" he asked, his voice low. Maya's fingers moved quickly over the small console on her wrist. After a tense moment, she looked up. "We've got a problem. A patrol is moving in your direction." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. There was no time to waste. "How long do we have?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Maya didn't hesitate. 5 minutes, max, she replied. Ethan's eyes darted between the team members. Ava was already assessing their route, looking for an alternative way out. Maya was still scanning for any other threats. The pressure was mounting, but Ethan knew one thing for sure: they had no choice but to keep moving. "We can't afford to be caught now," he said, his voice firm. "Let's go." The team moved swiftly, keeping to the shadows as much as possible, their steps light and purposeful. They knew the patrol was close, but they had to reach the shuttle bay before they were discovered. Every corridor felt like a maze, and every turn could lead them into a confrontation with the Zalkari. The thought of being trapped on this ship, with nowhere to go, gnawed at Ethan's mind. They had come so far, fought so hard, and they weren't going to fail now. As they rounded another corner, they heard the unmistakable sound of alien voices. The patrol was right around the corner. Ethan froze. His mind worked quickly, calculating their options. There was no time for a fight. They needed to move fast. Without a word, he motioned for the team to split up. Ava and Maya would take the left side of the corridor, and Ethan would take the right. The hope was that they could avoid detection by scattering and using the ship's layout to their advantage. The sound of footsteps grew louder as the patrol approached. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but his body remained still, blending into the shadows. He could hear his team moving quietly, the tension palpable. The patrol walked past them, oblivious to their presence. Ethan exhaled in relief. They had made it. For now. They regrouped quickly, moving forward with renewed determination. As they neared the docking bay, the countdown clock on Ethan's wrist showed only 2 minutes remaining. The shuttle was within sight, but they weren't out of danger yet. The door to the docking bay was still locked, and there was no guarantee they would be able to get it open in time. Ethan motioned for Maya to take care of it. "Get that door open, now," he urged. Maya's fingers worked quickly, her focus unwavering. She didn't speak, but Ethan could see the concentration in her eyes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door hissed open, revealing the shuttle bay beyond. Ethan wasted no time. "Let's move," he ordered, and the team sprinted toward the shuttle. As they boarded, Ethan glanced back at the massive Zalkari ship one last time. He knew they had only seconds before the EMP went off, and he didn't want to be anywhere near when it did. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and as they shot away from the flagship, Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The mission wasn't over, but they had done it. They had struck a blow against the Zalkari. And Earth had a fighting chance. Ethan sat in the shuttle, staring out the small window as the massive Zalkari flagship slowly became a distant speck in the vast expanse of space. The stars, once a comforting backdrop, now felt more like a cold, indifferent void. His heart was still racing, but for the first time since the mission began, he allowed himself to breathe. The EMP had worked. They had done their part. The Zalkari were no longer a direct threat to Earth, at least not for the moment. But Ethan knew the war wasn't over. The EMP had disabled the alien fleet's weapons, but it hadn't solved everything. The Zalkari were not a species that would simply retreat. They would regroup, and they would come back. But that was tomorrow's battle. Today, humanity had won a small but crucial victory. Ava, sitting at the controls, glanced back at him. "We're clear of their range." "We've bought some time," she said, her voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. Ethan nodded, his mind still working through the plan. "Time is what we need. We'll use it to prepare for whatever comes next." Maya, sitting beside him, wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead and looked at him with a tired but determined expression. "You think they'll retaliate?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze. "They won't stop until they've finished what they started. But this time, we'll be ready." The shuttle continued its journey, its engines humming steadily. They were headed for the rendezvous point, a secret military outpost on a remote moon, far from the Zalkari's reach. It was there that they would regroup, resupply, and plan their next move. The team had accomplished what many had thought impossible, but their mission was far from complete. Ethan knew this battle was only the beginning of a much larger war. As the shuttle sailed through the stars, his thoughts drifted back to Earth. What would become of the people there? Would they be ready for the aftermath of this conflict? Would they understand the true cost of survival? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain, the fight for humanity's future had only just begun. The shuttle's comm system beeped, pulling him from his thoughts. "Ethan, you there?" Maya's voice came through, her tone more serious now. "We've got a transmission from Earth. It's encrypted." Ethan sat up straighter. "Put it through," he said. The screen flickered to life, revealing a familiar face. "General Harris, leader of Earth's defense forces." "Ethan," the general began, his voice stern but relieved. "We've been watching your progress. The EMP worked, but the Zalkari have already begun to regroup. We've detected new ships entering our sector. They're not waiting." Ethan's stomach tightened. "How much time do we have?" he asked. "A few hours at most," the general replied. "We need you back on Earth, ASAP. We're counting on you." Ethan exchanged a quick glance with his team. They had fought hard to get this far, but now, the real war was beginning. "We're on our way," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "Tell Earth we'll be ready." As the transmission ended, the shuttle's course was adjusted, heading back toward the planet. The battle wasn't over. The Zalkari were still out there, and they weren't backing down. Ethan knew what had to be done. The fight for humanity's future was far from finished, but today, they had proven one thing: humanity could fight back. And they would keep fighting, no matter what came next. Ethan stood at the helm of the shuttle as it descended through Earth's atmosphere, his mind still processing the urgency of General Harris's message. The planet below was a patchwork of cities, forests, and oceans. Earth, the place he had fought so hard to protect. The countdown on his wrist reminded him that there was no time to waste. The Zalkari were regrouping, and with their new ships entering the sector, humanity was on the brink of a much larger conflict. Ava sat in the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the controls. "We're almost there," she said, glancing at the display. "I'll land us at the military base in less than an hour. Get ready." Maya, sitting beside Ethan, kept her eyes focused on the data stream coming from the Earth's defense network. She had been monitoring the incoming Zalkari fleet's movements, and from the looks of it, their enemies weren't wasting any time. "The new ships are unlike anything we've seen before," Maya said, her voice tense. "They're faster and more agile. If we're going to stand a chance, we need to rethink our strategy." Ethan nodded. "We'll figure it out when we land. Right now, we need to get back to Earth and prepare." The shuttle systems beeped as the military base's coordinates appeared on the display. Ethan glanced out the window as the base came into view, an imposing complex nestled in a vast, remote area. The ground beneath them was a patchwork of defenses, and large communication towers reached toward the sky. The base had become the heart of humanity's last stand, a place where the brightest minds and most capable soldiers gathered to plan Earth's next moves. As they touched down, Ethan couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. He and his team had already achieved the impossible by infiltrating the Zalkari flagship. But now the real challenge lay ahead. They were facing an enemy that was not only technologically superior but also relentless in its pursuit of conquest. The shuttle doors opened, and the cold air of Earth greeted them. Ethan and the team quickly disembarked, making their way to the command center. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, with military personnel hustling around, preparing for what could be the largest battle Earth had ever faced. General Harris met them as they entered. "Ethan," he said, his expression grim. "You're back just in time. The Zalkari have launched a full-scale assault. They've begun deploying their new ships, and we need a plan to counter them." Ethan exchanged a glance with Maya and Ava. "We've got one," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But we'll need everything you've got, resources, troops, and the best tech we can get our hands on." General Harris nodded. "You'll have it. We've also managed to get a few new weapons from the international coalition. They're still experimental, but they might give us the edge we need." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Experimental? We don't have time for tests. We need results." "I understand," the general replied. "But these weapons might be our only chance." Ethan looked around at the team, his heart swelling with pride. They had come so far, but this next battle would be unlike any they had faced before. The stakes were higher than ever, and the fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. "We don't have the luxury of time," Ethan said, his voice filled with resolve. "We fight. We fight until we can't anymore. And when that time comes, we fight some more." The team stood together, united by their cause, knowing that the fate of humanity was now in their hands. The countdown had begun. The final showdown with the Zalkari was about to unfold. And they would be ready. Ethan stood in the operations room, the hum of activity around him underscoring the weight of the moment. The countdown was ticking down, less than 30 minutes until the first wave of Zalkari ships would enter Earth's atmosphere. The team was gathered around the central command table, reviewing the final details of their strategy. General Harris was going over the latest intel with a steady voice. "We've identified 3 key points of attack. They're coming in from multiple directions. If we don't hit them fast and hard, they'll establish a foothold and overwhelm our defenses." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the tactical map displayed in front of him. The Zalkari fleet was divided into clusters, each one more advanced than the last. But they weren't invincible. They hadn't accounted for humanity's resolve, or the ingenuity that had led them this far. "We need to disable their communications and their ability to coordinate," Ethan said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "If we can create chaos within their ranks, we can take away their advantage." Ava, who had been reviewing the pilot's brief, glanced up. "I'll take the first squadron. We'll hit their communication relay stations from the air. The element of surprise is our best weapon right now." "Good," Ethan said, his eyes meeting hers. "Once you've disrupted their communications, we'll move in with the ground forces." Maya, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. "What about the new weapons?" she asked. "Have we tested them enough to rely on them in the field?" General Harris gave her a pointed look. "We've had limited trials, but the results are promising. We're hoping they'll give us an edge." Maya wasn't convinced. "We don't have time for hope. We need results." "We'll make it work," Ethan said, his voice firm. "We'll take whatever we can get. It's all we've got." The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of the situation settled in. Ethan knew this battle was different. It wasn't just about survival. It was about securing humanity's future in the galaxy. And the stakes had never been higher. "All right," Ethan said, standing tall. "Everyone knows their role. Let's move out." The team broke from the table, each one heading to their assigned stations. Ethan's heart beat faster as he made his way to the command center. His mind was a whirlwind of strategy, calculations, and one single, unwavering thought: they had to win. As he entered the command center, the sheer scale of the operation hit him. Monitors lined the walls, tracking the movements of the Zalkari ships. Soldiers were stationed at every post, ready for action. The air was thick with tension, but Ethan could see the resolve in everyone's eyes. They were ready. He stood at the front, looking out at the screens, his mind racing with every possible outcome. "Status report," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge that conveyed the urgency of the situation. "Squadron 1 is in position," Ava's voice came through the comms. "We're ready to engage." "Ground teams are set," Maya added, her voice steady. "We're prepared to move once you give the order." Ethan took a deep breath. This was it. The moment they had all been preparing for. The Zalkari were closing in, and Earth's fate rested on the actions they would take in the next few hours. He looked at the faces around him, the soldiers, the pilots, the scientists, all of them standing at the ready. "All right," he said, his voice steady but filled with purpose. "This is humanity's last chance. Let's make it count." The command center erupted into activity as everyone sprang into motion. Ethan knew that this battle would test everything they had, every ounce of courage, every drop of ingenuity, every ounce of hope. But they were ready. They had no other choice. The first wave of Zalkari ships was inbound, and Earth was about to take its stand. Ethan stood at the command center, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The first wave of Zalkari ships was now in range, and the time for planning had ended. It was all about execution now. The room buzzed with activity as soldiers, pilots, and engineers worked in unison, preparing for the largest battle humanity had ever faced. The tension was palpable, but so was the determination. Ethan could see it in the eyes of his team. They were ready. "Status report," he said, his voice calm but commanding. Ava's voice came through the comms immediately. "Squadron 1 is in position, ready to engage. We'll hit their communication relay first. Ground teams are standing by," Maya added, her tone steady but urgent. "We can move as soon as you give the order." Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over the tactical map. The Zalkari fleet was divided into several clusters, each one moving in with surgical precision. Their technology was advanced, but they didn't have the advantage of surprise. That was humanity's edge. "All units, begin your attack," Ethan ordered. "We take down their communications and disrupt their coordination. Once that's done, we push forward." The command center erupted into motion as the various units sprang into action. Ava led the charge from the air, her squadron darting toward the first set of Zalkari communication relays. The fighters weaved through space, avoiding incoming fire while launching precise strikes to disable the alien relay stations. Ethan watched the feed, his mind calculating the next move. He knew that this was just the beginning. Taking out their communications would create confusion within the enemy ranks, but it wasn't enough. The Zalkari would regroup, adapt, and counterattack. That was where the ground teams came in. Maya was already working on the strategy to neutralize the enemy's reinforcements. "We need to strike fast," Maya said as she worked the data, analyzing the Zalkari fleet's movements. "They're coming in from the east quadrant, but there's a weak spot in their formation. If we can exploit that, we'll split their forces and disrupt their response." Ethan nodded, his mind already in motion. "Prepare the ground forces to move. We'll push from the east and take out their secondary defenses." "Understood," Maya replied, sending the orders through. Ethan knew that every decision had to be made with precision. One wrong move could cost them everything. The air in the command center grew thick with tension as the Zalkari ships continued to advance. The clock was ticking. Time was running out. Ethan glanced at the countdown clock on the wall. Just minutes before the Zalkari would hit full strength, before they could regroup and counter the attack. "Stay sharp, everyone," Ethan said, his voice steady, but with an edge of urgency. "This is our chance. We fight, and we don't stop fighting until the job is done. The battle was far from over, but the first wave of their plan had been set into motion. Ava's squadron was taking down the relays, the ground forces were preparing to hit the enemy's flank, and Ethan knew that no matter what happened, they couldn't afford to let up. The Valkyrie might have the advantage of technology, but humanity had something they could never understand, the will to fight for survival, for home, and for each other. Ethan looked at his team, his friends, his comrades. They were ready. "Let's do this," he said, his voice filled with resolve. The fate of Earth was in their hands.